The stars had always been my canvas. Growing up on the quiet edges of Earth, I spent most of my nights staring into the vast expanse, letting my thoughts drift between constellations and the unknown. There was something about the night sky that held me captive, as if it whispered of secrets waiting to be uncovered. But none of my dreams had prepared me for the truth I would soon learn, that the universe was far more mysterious and dangerous than I had ever imagined. It started one evening when a flare of light cut through the sky faster than any satellite. At first I thought it was a shooting star, but the trail it left behind lingered. It wasn't long before the object, a small glowing craft, landed in the clearing just outside our farm. My heart raced. I was about to witness something that no human should ever see, something that would shake the very foundation of everything I thought I knew. The door to the ship slid open with a hiss, and out stepped a figure that made my breath catch in my throat. She was tall, ethereal, with shimmering skin that seemed to shift in the moonlight. Her hair flowed like liquid silver, cascading around her shoulders. She wasn't human. Her eyes, a deep, otherworldly violet, glowed as if reflecting the stars themselves. "My name is Lyra," she said, her voice melodic but filled with authority. "I need your help." I couldn't respond immediately. Every inch of me wanted to run, to hide from the impossibility standing before me. But something in her presence rooted me to the ground. "Help?" I finally managed to ask, my voice shaking. "With what?" Lyra took a step forward, her gaze locking with mine. "My people are in danger. I come from a distant planet, and we are being threatened by a force much stronger than us. You, your species, can help us." She paused, studying me intently. "I've chosen you." A part of me wanted to laugh, to tell her she was mistaken. I was just a farm girl, ordinary in every way. But the seriousness in her eyes made me hesitate. There was no mistaking the gravity of what she was saying. The weight of her words pressed down on me like 1,000 suns. "My people are powerful," Lyra continued, stepping closer. "But we cannot win this war alone. The enemy we face is relentless. I've traveled across galaxies to find someone who could give us the edge we need." Her words hung in the air, each one a thread pulling me deeper into something I could never have imagined. My mind raced. Was she insane? Was this some kind of elaborate hoax? Yet in the pit of my stomach I knew she wasn't lying. I could feel it deep inside, a strange connection to her that went beyond reason. I wanted to ask more questions, to understand what this was all about. But before I could speak, there was a sudden noise from behind us. It was the sound of a heavy footstep, unnaturally loud and deliberate. Lyra's head snapped around, her eyes narrowing. "They've found us," she muttered under her breath. I turned just as a massive figure emerged from the shadows, a being far taller and more terrifying than Lyra. His skin was a deep, sickly green, and his eyes were the color of burning embers. His presence was enough to make the air feel heavy, suffocating. "Lyra," the creature growled, his voice a low rumble. "You cannot escape. You are ours." Lyra stood her ground, her stance unyielding. "I'll never be yours," she snapped, her voice as sharp as a blade. The alien's lips curled into a sneer. "You think you can defy us? You've always been weak, Lyra. Your people are nothing. You a traitor seeking to ally with these creatures," he spat, gesturing to me. "They are nothing but ants." He took a step forward, and the air seemed to crackle with menace. My heart pounded in my chest. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I was terrified, utterly terrified. But something inside me told me that standing there and doing nothing was not an option. As the alien took another step toward us, I found my voice. "She doesn't need to be what you say she is. She's more than you could ever understand. And if you want her, you'll have to get through me first." The alien froze, his eyes narrowing before he let out a mocking laugh. "You're no warrior. You're just a weak human." Lyra's gaze shifted to me, her violet eyes filled with a mixture of surprise and something else. Admiration, perhaps. I couldn't tell. But in that moment I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about helping Lyra. It was about standing up for what was right. Even when the odds seemed insurmountable, I wasn't about to let this alien take Lyra, or anyone else, without a fight. The alien's laughter echoed in the night, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. His gaze, filled with contempt, remained fixed on me as he took another step forward. My legs felt like jelly beneath me, but I refused to move. In that moment, I understood the weight of what I had said. It wasn't just a reckless declaration, it was a promise to stand by Lyra, even if it meant facing an enemy far stronger than me. Do you think you can stop me? The alien sneered, his deep voice vibrating with malice. You have no power. You're just a human. And she, he turned his gaze to Lyra, is nothing but a traitor. Lyra didn't flinch. She remained still, her gaze unwavering. Her eyes locked with mine, and in that brief, silent moment I saw something I hadn't seen before. Hope. It was a glimmer, small yet undeniable, like the first light of dawn breaking through the darkness. No one gets to call me a traitor, Lyra said, her voice steady but filled with an undeniable force. And no one gets to take what's mine. The alien, if possible, seemed to grow even larger in his fury. He raised one massive arm, his hand outstretched as if to crush us both. The air grew thick and the ground beneath my feet trembled with the power he was ready to unleash. But I didn't run. I couldn't. There was something inside me, something far deeper than fear, that kept me rooted to the spot. It was the same feeling I had when I first saw the craft in the field. This wasn't just a random event. It was fate, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. Before I could even process what was happening, Lyra moved faster than I could follow. With a graceful, fluid motion, she raised her arm and a blast of energy shot from her hand, striking the alien in the chest with the force of 1,000 storms. He staggered back, his roar of pain shaking the ground beneath us. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The alien stood there, his chest heaving, smoke rising from where Lyra's energy blast had struck him. It wasn't enough to kill him, but it was enough to slow him down. That was all we needed. Lyra turned to me, her expression softening. I've never needed anyone to fight my battles before, she said, her voice a quiet revelation. But maybe it's time to learn. I nodded, the weight of her words settling over me like a heavy cloak. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about fighting for something greater than ourselves. We were in this together now. The alien, his expression twisted in fury, finally recovered. He wiped the blood from his mouth, his eyes burning with hatred. You will regret this, he hissed. You think you can defy me? You think you can defy my queen? The mention of a queen caught my attention. I had assumed he was just some random henchman, but the mention of a queen changed everything. The stakes were higher than I had realized. We weren't just fighting some rogue alien. We were up against an empire, one that saw us as nothing more than insects to be squashed. We'll see about that, Lyra said, her voice a low growl. She raised her hand again, her eyes glowing with determination. You've made a grave mistake. Before the alien could react, Lyra's energy flared once more, this time swirling around her like a storm. She was a force to be reckoned with, unstoppable, untouchable. The alien had underestimated her, and now he would pay the price. But just as the energy reached its peak, the sky above us seemed to crack open with a sudden flash of light. A massive shadow loomed over us, and from the darkness above a voice boomed. Enough. The alien, who had seemed so imposing moments before, recoiled, his fear evident in his eyes. He dropped to one knee, his head bowed in submission. Your Majesty, he said, his voice trembling. I did not mean to. I know what you've done, the voice said, cutting him off. And I will deal with you later. A figure descended from the darkened sky so large that she blotted out the stars. She was everything I had imagined and more, a being of pure power. Her presence radiated an overwhelming aura of authority. She was beautiful yet terrifying. Her eyes glowed like molten gold, and her skin shimmered with a translucent sheen. She was an alien queen, untouchable, invincible. Her gaze landed on Lyra and me, and for the first time in my life I felt like an ant beneath her gaze. There was no doubt in my mind now. This was the enemy we were up against. Why won't you accept her? The queen demanded, her voice cold and commanding. I stood tall, the weight of her words pressing down on me. But I wouldn't back down, not now. Not after everything Lyra had done for me. I turned to the queen, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at my insides. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice quiet but firm. Who is she to you? The queen's eyes narrowed. Lyra is my daughter, and I will have her back. The words hit me like a thunderbolt. Lyra wasn't just some rogue alien running from her people. She was royalty. She had a mother, a queen, who would stop at nothing to bring her home. Lyra's face remained calm, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers clenched into fists at her sides. I will never return to you, she said, her voice fierce. The queen's eyes flashed with anger, but there was something else there too. something I hadn't expected. Hurt. It was only there for a second, but it was enough to make me hesitate. "Then you leave me no choice," the Queen said, her voice cold once again. "You will either accept your place or I will force you to." I felt the weight of the situation press down on me. We weren't just fighting for survival anymore. We were fighting for Lyra's freedom, and in a way, our own. The Queen had made her move. But this wasn't over. The tension in the air was palpable. The Queen, towering above us with an aura of unshakable power, seemed like the embodiment of all the darkness and control that her empire represented. She was a being who demanded obedience, whose very presence bent the world around her. But Lyra, my Lyra, was different. She was standing there, defiant, her stance strong and unwavering. I could see the fire in her eyes, the fire that had once been kindled in a far-off galaxy but had found its home in her heart, in her soul. The Queen's gaze flickered between Lyra and me, and in her golden eyes, I saw something unexpected, a crack in her impervious exterior. For a fleeting moment, there was a glimmer of vulnerability, as if she could see the fight in Lyra that she had once nurtured, but it was quickly replaced by icy resolve. "You've grown weak," the Queen said, her voice low and cutting, like the edge of a blade. "You have forgotten your place. You are my daughter. You belong with me, not with these creatures." Lyra's jaw clenched. "I'm not your puppet. I never was. And I'll never be what you want me to be." The Queen's lips twisted into a bitter smile. "You don't understand, do you? You were never meant to be free. The galaxy was never meant to be yours to choose. I chose your path for you, Lyra, just as I chose everything else. You were created to serve the Empire, to rule with me by my side. But I never wanted to rule." Lyra shot back, her voice trembling with the weight of all the years she had spent running. "I wanted to live my life, to find my own way, my own freedom. Not this prison you want to keep me in." The Queen's expression darkened and she raised her hand, her fingers glowing with a dangerous energy. "You are a disappointment, and I will not let your rebellion go unpunished." In that instant, Lyra stepped forward, her eyes locked on the Queen, her hand raised in response. The energy between them crackled like a live wire, a battle of will so intense that it made the very air shimmer with their power. It was clear that this was more than a physical confrontation. It was a clash of ideologies, of freedom versus control, of rebellion versus oppression. "I won't go back to you," Lyra said, her voice steady now, filled with a quiet, fierce determination. "Not now, not ever, and I will do whatever it takes to stop you." The Queen's eyes narrowed, and for the first time she looked unsure. She didn't speak for a moment, as though trying to gauge the depths of Lyra's resolve. Then, with a flick of her wrist, the Queen sent a wave of energy crashing toward us. The force of it was so powerful that the ground beneath my feet shattered, sending rocks and debris flying through the air. I ducked instinctively, covering my head with my arms. The air was thick with dust and debris, the world around me spinning with the chaos of the Queen's attack. I could hear Lyra's voice cutting through the tumult, a command, a rallying cry, "Get down!" I turned just in time to see Lyra raise both hands, and the air around her shimmered with the force of her energy. She deflected the Queen's blast with an explosion of light, the energy crashing against her shield like a storm hitting the sea. The force sent us both flying backward, but Lyra held firm. She wasn't going down. Not without a fight. I landed hard on the ground, gasping for breath, the world spinning around me. For a moment, all I could hear was the rush of blood in my ears and the pounding of my heart. But then I heard Lyra's voice again, steady and strong. "Get up," she called. "We're not finished yet." With all the strength I could muster, I pushed myself up, dusting off my clothes. My body ached from the impact, but there was no time to focus on pain. Lyra was still standing, still fighting. The Queen's voice rang out, cold and menacing. "You cannot defeat me, Lyra. You are nothing but a child trying to play in a world you don't understand. Your rebellion ends now." But Lyra was unyielding. "I may not understand everything, but I understand this. I won't let you take my freedom. I won't let you take my life. You're not my queen anymore." The Queen's eyes flashed with fury, and in that instant I saw the truth of her. She was afraid of losing her power, afraid of what might happen if her daughter, her creation, defied her. For a moment, I wondered what it must have been like for Lyra, to grow up under this pressure, to have the weight of an empire pushing her down. I wondered how long it had taken for her to find the strength to run. But I also knew one thing for sure. Lyra had changed. She wasn't the same person who had fled all those years ago. She was stronger now, stronger than her mother, stronger than anyone had given her credit for. And I wasn't about to stand by and let this queen take her away again. I turned to Lyra, my voice steady despite the fear in my chest. "You're not alone," I said, my words simple but firm. "I'm with you." Lyra looked at me, a soft smile tugging at the corners of her lips. For the first time since this all began, there was something light in her eyes, something that told me we could win this. We could stop the queen together. The queen glared at us, her expression darkening. "You think you can defy me?" She spat, her voice venomous. "I'll make sure you regret this, but I wasn't scared anymore." I had no idea how we were going to win, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't about to let Lyra face this alone. And no matter what it took, I was going to stand by her side until the very end. The Queen's empire might have been powerful, but it was nothing compared to the strength that lay within us, within Lyra, and within the bond we shared. The Queen's fury radiated through the air, an invisible force pushing against us like a physical weight. She was used to control, to being obeyed, but Lyra, standing strong beside me, was a symbol of defiance, of freedom. It was clear that the Queen's power was nothing without the obedience of those she ruled. She needed Lyra to bow, to return to the fold, but Lyra's heart was no longer hers to command. "You really think you can defy me?" the Queen hissed, her voice seething with contempt. "I gave you everything, Lyra. I made you. And you betray me for this. This human?" Lyra's eyes burned with unspoken emotions, anger, hurt, but above all a fierce sense of purpose. "You didn't make me. You controlled me. You twisted me into something I'm not. But I'm not your puppet anymore." The Queen's face twisted in rage, her fists clenching. She raised both arms, and the ground around her began to tremble as she channeled her energy. Dark tendrils of power snaked toward us, twisting and curling through the air, sharp and menacing. I instinctively stepped back, fear clutching at my chest. This was a force of nature, and no human could survive such raw power. But Lyra wasn't afraid. She had seen this before. This was her world, her inheritance. But now it wasn't enough to fight with power alone. She had something more, the strength to stand against it. "Enough," Lyra shouted, her voice a clarion call that seemed to cut through the storm around us. Her hands were raised high, and I could feel the pulse of energy emanating from her, as if she were tapping into something deep within herself. A well of strength that even I hadn't known existed. The tendrils of the Queen's dark power recoiled, as though repelled by an invisible barrier. The Queen's eyes narrowed, her expression one of disbelief and fury. "You dare challenge me?" she demanded. Lyra didn't respond with words. Instead, her energy flared, a bright, blinding light that filled the air between us. It was as though the very stars themselves had descended upon the earth, shining with the power of 1,000 suns. The Queen's power faltered, and for a brief moment she seemed uncertain. Her confidence wavered, and I could see the doubt creeping into her gaze. But this wasn't enough. I could feel it. There was something still holding Lyra back, something that stopped her from unleashing everything she had. The Queen knew it too. "You think you can defeat me with this light?" The Queen sneered. "You are nothing without your power. You are weak, and you will never be what you truly are." Lyra's expression hardened. "I'm not weak. I am everything I've chosen to be." The Queen's eyes flared, and she stepped forward, her power surging. The ground cracked beneath her feet, sending debris flying. I could feel the heat radiating off her, and the air grew thick with the weight of her presence. This was the true face of power, the kind that could crush a star if it wanted to. But Lyra didn't flinch. She stood her ground, the energy surrounding her like a protective shield. It was as if she were drawing from some deep, hidden reservoir, something more than just raw power. It was courage. It was conviction. It was everything she had fought for in the years she had spent running. It was her refusal to be controlled. "You don't get to decide what I am," Lyra said, her voice unwavering. "I am not your weapon. I am not your puppet. I am free." I could see the Queen faltering. Her movements became less sure, her power beginning to wane as Lyra's light grew brighter. She had underestimated her daughter. She had thought that the years of control had shaped Lyra into something she could manipulate, but she had been wrong. This wasn't just about Lyra's power. It was about her freedom. And freedom, as I was beginning to realize, was something no empire could conquer. The Queen had spent so long controlling everything. thinking that her power was all that mattered. That she had forgotten one crucial thing. You can't control someone who has learned to control themselves. For a moment, there was silence. The queen stood, her chest heaving as she tried to summon more power, but Lyra's light was overpowering it. The air around us hummed with the force of their clash, the sound like 1,000 storms colliding. And then, with a final blinding burst, Lyra's energy surged forward. The queen was thrown back, her body crashing into the rocks behind her. She let out a scream of frustration, her power flickering as she struggled to regain control. For a moment, she seemed like just another being, fragile, vulnerable, and human in a way that no one would have ever guessed. But she was not defeated. Not yet. You will regret this, Lyra, the queen spat, her voice hoarse. No one defies me and lives. Lyra stepped forward, her energy still crackling around her like a storm. She was bruised, her body exhausted from the battle, but she stood taller than ever before. I'm not afraid of you anymore, she said, her voice filled with strength. I could see the queen's eyes narrow, her fury mounting. But this time there was no fear in Lyra. There was no hesitation. And for the first time in this battle, I saw the queen falter, not from the blast, but from the realization that her grip on her daughter was slipping away forever. You have no more control over me, Lyra said, her voice steady. You never did. The queen, her face twisted with rage, lifted her hand once more, preparing to strike. But I could see something in her eyes now, something different. It wasn't just anger. It was fear. Fear of losing everything she had built. Fear of losing her own daughter. Lyra wasn't just fighting for her life anymore. She was fighting for her freedom. And with every breath she took, she was claiming it. The silence stretched, heavy and thick, between Lyra and her mother, the alien queen. It was an unsettling stillness like the calm before a storm. The queen, her hands still raised in defiance, seemed to be gathering her remaining strength, but the power she once held so effortlessly was beginning to slip through her fingers. Lyra's energy had thrown her off balance, and for the first time in what seemed like centuries, the queen was uncertain. You think you can defeat me? The queen hissed, her voice strained. Her golden eyes flickered with frustration, no longer filled with the all-consuming rage from earlier. You are nothing without me, Lyra. I am your mother, your queen. You owe me everything. But Lyra, standing tall, unwavering, did not flinch. There was no hesitation in her gaze. You don't own me. You never did, she said, her voice steady and full of conviction. I've spent my whole life running from you, from what you wanted me to be. But now I'm done running. The queen's eyes widened as she took a step back, as if the words had struck a nerve deeper than she had ever imagined. The air around us vibrated with tension. The queen's power was still vast, but Lyra's defiance had shifted something within her. She no longer held the upper hand, and she knew it. For a long moment, the queen stood there, staring at her daughter as though seeing her for the first time. She had spent years shaping Lyra into the perfect tool, the perfect heir to her throne, but it hadn't worked. Lyra had broken free from her control. That realization seemed to ripple through the queen's entire being, and for the first time I saw the cracks in her facade of power. You, the queen's voice trembled just for a second before she regained control. You have no idea what you've done. Lyra's eyes softened, but her resolve did not waver. I know exactly what I've done. I've chosen to live my own life. You wanted me to be a queen, but I never asked for that. I wanted to be free. The queen took a step forward, but this time she was slower, more deliberate. The air between us grew heavier with each passing second, and I could feel the power of both their energies clashing. A tempest waiting to burst. She had come to reclaim her daughter, to bring her back into the fold. But what would happen now? What was the queen prepared to do to keep her empire intact? You think you can just walk away from everything I've built? The queen demanded, her voice cold as ice. You're nothing without me, Lyra. Without me, you have nothing. You're just a lost little girl with nowhere to go. Lyra stepped forward, her energy crackling in the air around her, the brilliant light shining from her like the sun breaking through a storm. I'm not lost. I'm not your little girl anymore. I'm my own person. I found my place in this world, and it's not by your side. The queen's face twisted in rage. She had been defeated before, but never like this. She had always believed that Lyra would come back, that she would kneel before her once more. But Lyra's words, her strength, had shattered that illusion. Enough, the queen roared, her voice shaking the very ground beneath us. You will regret this. You will pay for your disobedience. Her hand sparked with a terrible energy, darker and more intense than anything I had seen before. The air grew heavy, crackling with the sheer force of her fury. I could feel it. Her power was building again, ready to strike. But this time Lyra was ready. I won't regret anything, Lyra said, her voice low and firm, the calm before the storm. I won't let you take anything from me. The Queen's eyes blazed with hatred. She raised her arms high, and a torrent of energy surged toward us, more powerful than before, more dangerous. It was a destructive wave, one that could wipe out everything in its path. Lyra didn't hesitate. She raised her hand, and the light around her flared once more, bright enough to blind anyone who looked directly at it. The two forces collided, a blinding explosion of light and dark, a battle of opposing worlds. The ground beneath us cracked, sending rocks and debris flying. I shielded my face with my arm, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the incredible display of power. The force of the clash sent shockwaves through the air, reverberating through every inch of the battlefield. I could feel the energy vibrating through my bones, and for a moment I was afraid that this might be the end, that Lyra might not be able to stop her mother. But then through the smoke and dust I saw her, Lyra standing strong, her light a beacon in the chaos. The Queen's power faltered, and she screamed in fury. You defy me, but I am the Queen. You are nothing without me. Lyra cut her off, her voice sharp as a blade. And you will never control me again. With that final, defiant declaration, the Queen's energy began to wane, flickering like a dying flame. She staggered back, her power crumbling under the weight of Lyra's unwavering resolve. For a long moment, the battlefield was silent, save for the heavy breathing of both the Queen and Lyra. The Queen stood there, staring at her daughter with disbelief and rage. She had never imagined this would happen, never imagined that the one she had sought to control would stand against her. But Lyra was free. She had finally broken the chains that bound her to a past she had never wanted, and now there was nothing the Queen could do to change that. The Queen, her chest heaving with anger and frustration, finally spoke, her voice hollow. You think this is over? Lyra's gaze was calm, filled with something more powerful than anger. Peace. Yes, it is. The Queen took one last look at her daughter, her eyes filled with something akin to grief, but it was too late for regret. She had lost. And Lyra had won. With a final guttural growl of frustration, the Queen turned, her enormous form vanishing into the shadows. The battle was over. But for Lyra and me, it was just the beginning of something far greater. The silence left in the wake of the Queen's retreat was deafening. It felt like the very air was holding its breath, as if waiting for the next shoe to drop. For a moment, neither Lyra nor I moved. The echoes of the battle still lingered, the dust settling around us like a veil over a battlefield that had seen the end of something far greater than just a fight between two individuals. Lyra stood tall, her chest rising and falling with the effort of the battle she had fought, but her eyes were different. They were softer now, more at peace, as if a weight she had been carrying for years had finally been lifted. She wasn't the same person who had first crash-landed on Earth, running from her past, hiding from the Empire that had tried to shape her into a weapon. She was free, truly free. I couldn't help but stare at her, awe in my heart. This wasn't just the girl I had come to know over these past few days. This was something more, someone who had faced the unimaginable and come out the other side with strength and courage that I could never have imagined. Are you okay? I asked quietly, not sure what else to say. I wanted to ask about everything, the battle, her past, the Queen, but I knew she needed time. Time to process, to breathe, to be herself without the shadow of the Empire looming over her. Lyra glanced at me, and for the first time since I met her, she smiled. It was small, but it was real. I'm more than okay, she replied, her voice soft but filled with something new. For the first time in my life, I'm not running from anything. I felt a surge of relief. After everything we had been through, after the constant danger, the fear, the uncertainty, it was finally over. We had won, but I also knew there was more to Lyra's story than she was letting on. She had faced a lifetime of oppression, of being forced into a role she never wanted, and even now, she was still processing what that meant. I can't believe it's really over, I said, my voice a little breathless. The Queen, your mother, she's gone. Lyra nodded, her expression unreadable for a moment. She's gone, but that doesn't mean the Empire is. There's still so much work to be done. I could feel the weight of her words. While we had defeated the Queen, the empire she had built was vast. It was a force that had conquered worlds, suppressed civilizations, and left destruction in its wake. Lyra had freed herself from its grip, but the battle was far from over. The empire wouldn't fall so easily, not without a fight. "I know," I said, my voice quieter now. "But you don't have to do it alone." Lyra's gaze softened. "I know, I've learned that the hard way. It's not about being alone anymore. It's about choosing who you stand with." I swallowed hard, the implications of her words hitting me all at once. This wasn't just about saving her from her mother. It was about standing together, fighting for something bigger than both of us. It was about changing the galaxy one step at a time. We stood there in the aftermath, the weight of everything still hanging between us. But in that silence, there was a sense of hope, a spark of something new, something powerful. Lyra had found her strength, and now she would help others find theirs. And I, though just a human caught up in something far beyond my understanding, knew I would stand beside her for whatever came next. "So, what now?" I asked, breaking the silence. "What do we do?" Lyra took a deep breath, her eyes distant for a moment as if she were contemplating the weight of her next words. "Now we rebuild. We find the people who are still under the Empire's thumb, the ones who are fighting for their freedom, and we help them. We can't change everything at once, but we can start. And we can do it together." Her words resonated in me, and for the first time in a long while I felt truly inspired. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't just about fighting the Queen. It was about making a real difference, about changing the world and perhaps even the galaxy for the better. "But we're not going to do it alone," I said, my voice stronger now. "We'll need allies, people who believe in what we're fighting for." Lyra nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Exactly. And that's where you come in." I raised an eyebrow. "Me? I'm just a human. I don't have any powers." "Maybe not," she said, her tone playful. "But you've got something more important. You've got heart. And right now, that's exactly what we need." Her words filled me with a sense of purpose that I hadn't known I was missing. It wasn't about power or strength, it was about belief, about standing for something even when the odds were against you. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I had to do. "Then let's get started," I said, a grin spreading across my face. "Let's make sure the Queen's empire doesn't get to control anyone ever again." Lyra's eyes gleamed with a mixture of determination and something more. Something that spoke of a future full of hope and possibility. "Together," she said, "and together we would stand. We would face whatever came next, no matter how impossible it seemed. Because now we had something worth fighting for, and that I realized was more powerful than anything else." We turned toward the horizon, the stars above us a reminder that this was just the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and the journey ahead would be long, but we were ready for it. We were ready to fight for the freedom of those who had none, to be the change the universe so desperately needed. The battle for freedom had just begun, but together we would change everything. The stars above shimmered like distant promises, each one a beacon in the darkened sky. It was strange, this quiet after the storm. After everything that had happened, after the battles, the confrontations, the fear, there was an odd sense of calm. Yet beneath that calm, the weight of the future pressed heavily on us both. We had won, but the war was far from over. Lyra and I stood side by side looking toward the horizon, where the distant glow of stars and planets flickered like tiny beacons of hope. There was no going back. The Queen might have been defeated, but her empire was vast, its reach far beyond what either of us could imagine. We had only scratched the surface, so what now? I asked quietly, my gaze still fixed on the stars. "How do we even begin to undo everything she's done?" Lyra remained silent for a moment, her eyes distant as though she were seeing something far beyond the sky before us. "We start with the people, the ones who are still under the Empire's control, the ones who believe they have no choice but to submit. We need to show them that they can fight back, that they have the power to make a difference." I nodded, understanding what she meant. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be battles, losses, and heartache along the way. But there would also be hope. Lyra had found her strength, and now it was time for others to find theirs. "And we'll need allies," I added. "There are others out there, people who can help. We can't do this alone." Lyra turned to face me, her violet eyes locking with mine, filled with an intensity that made my heart race. "You're not alone in this, you know. We're in this together. I've never had anyone by my side like this before." I won't let you go through this alone. Her words hit me harder than I expected. In those few simple sentences, she had said so much. She had given me something I had never expected: trust. Lyra, who had spent her whole life running from her past, who had fought alone for so long, was now standing beside me, not just as an ally, but as a partner. I won't let you down, I said, my voice steady. We'll find those allies. We'll find the strength we need to take on the Empire. Together. A soft smile crossed her face, and for the first time it wasn't tinged with sadness or anger. It was genuine. Together, she echoed. The journey ahead would be long. We didn't know what the future held, but we knew one thing for certain. We had each other. We would face the darkness, the uncertainty, and the fear, but we would do it together, and that made all the difference. As we walked away from the battlefield, leaving behind the remnants of the Queen's empire, the stars above us seemed to shine a little brighter. The universe, vast and uncertain, stretched out before us, and I realized that this was just the beginning. We had no guarantees. We didn't know what obstacles awaited us or what challenges we would face, but in that moment, with Lyra by my side, I knew that we could handle whatever came next. We would be the change the galaxy needed. We would rebuild not just a broken empire, but the hope that had been crushed under it. We would fight for freedom, for the right to live and to be who we were meant to be. And as we walked into the night, the stars above us burning brightly, I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The journey had only just begun, but I was ready for whatever came next. Because with Lyra by my side, I knew we could change the universe. The last remnants of the Queen's empire would fall, but freedom would rise.